us. Welcome to WISH. My name is Lise Elliott, and I'm Professor of Neuroscience and co-chair of the Women in Science and Healthcare Symposium with Dr. Susie Hawkins and Christine Burgess, who are with us in the room today. On behalf of this entire team, I'm delighted to welcome you to the second in our 10th annual WISH series, presented by Dr. Shikha Jain from the University of Illinois Cancer Center here in Chicago. In this special anniversary year, we honor Rosalind Franklin with the theme Women's Leadership Under the Microscope, developed by our dedicated WISH Advisory Committee, I just want to acknowledge here, who helped us come up with this theme and have been very influential in guiding the content of WISH. I also want to thank our excellent WISH implementation team, our co-chairs, and then Amy Hilsey, Ryan Roush, and Patty Bender, who make all this happen. I'd be remiss if I didn't put in a quick plug for the final seminar in our series, which will take place on May 14th by economist Mabel Abraham from Columbia Business School, who's going to speak about leadership in organizations as they impact gendered economic outcomes. So without further ado, I have the honor of introducing today's speaker, Dr. Shikha Jain, who's a triple board certified hematologist and oncologist at the University of Illinois Cancer Center. She's a nationally recognized expert in GI malignancies who specializes in colorectal, pancreatic, neuroendocrine, and hepatobiliary cancers. She also serves as the Associate Director of Oncology Communication and Digital Innovation at UIC. Dr. Jain received her MD from Michigan State University, an institution we're all feeling a lot more connected to these days. She completed her residency in internal medicine at UIC and then a Hem-Onc fellowship at Loyola University Chicago Hospital. She held her first faculty appointment at Northwestern and then Rush, and then moved to UIC in 2020, where she was promoted to associate professor with tenure in hematology oncology. Dr. Jain has served on as PI on dozens of clinical trials and published hundreds of articles, both peer-reviewed and op-eds, in periodicals including the New York Times, USA Today, Chicago Tribune, Medscape, and Doximity. She's a prominent media voice, appearing on CNN, MSNBC, and regularly on Fox 32, informing the public about topics as wide-ranging as COVID, cancer, and women's leadership. So this latter topic is a special passion for Dr. Jain, who founded and remains board chair of Chicago's annual Women in Medicine Summit. She also founded several related initiatives, all of which aim to advance gender equity and women's leadership in healthcare. Through her research, publications, media appearance, and tireless advocacy, Dr. Jain's become a leading voice for transforming healthcare, elevating women, and empowering the next generation of leaders. In other words, her mission is deeply aligned with WISH, and so we're thrilled to welcome her here today to present her seminar, It's Not You, How Systems Produce Impostor Phenomena.
Thank you, and thank you all for your patience with the technology that we all love so much. And thank you for that lovely introduction. I have a lot of slides, and we are now limited on time. So I also often put extra slides in my talks because many people ask for my lecture slides afterwards. So there'll be some slides I may skip over or go quickly so that we have enough time for discussion and question at the end. I love talking about this topic because it's something that when I was in training, I didn't know what imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon was. So I'm excited to talk with you all today. I have no relevant financial disclosures other than I am the founder of Women in Medicine. All right, so we're going to today talk a little bit about what's holding women back when it comes to leadership, healthcare, and in both academia and beyond, really in medicine altogether. We'll first start by defining what is imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome, what fuels it in our healthcare systems, and how can we change the system. So before I keep moving on, I would like a show of hands for people in the room, and those of you on Zoom, you can raise your hands at home. How many of you do not know what imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon is? Okay, so it looks like everybody does. How many of you have ever experienced imposter phenomena or imposter syndrome? So I would give a talk similar to this during COVID, and I would ask that question on Zoom, and all of a sudden I just hear bing, 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 because everybody's hands would go up. It's really interesting because one of the things, see, I love the hands on Zoom. One of the things that many of us don't realize is we see people who are very accomplished, and we don't realize how much they also are feeling very similar to what we feel, which is this feeling of not belonging or not really deserving the accolades that we get. So what is imposter syndrome? It's also known as imposter phenomenon or fraud syndrome. It's often very high achieving individuals who feel like they aren't good enough. They aren't really able to acknowledge or accept the fact that their hard work has gotten them to where they are. And I'll tell you, I have imposter phenomenon before I go on stage. Every time I speak, or I wonder, why was I invited here? I'm not an expert. I'm not the leading voice on this, that, or the other. So it happens to everyone. And it's that feeling of, oh my gosh, what if I mess up? What if they figure out that I'm not actually who they think I am? They think I'm great. What if they realize I'm really not that great? It's a very common feeling that many high achieving individuals have. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever met this woman. This is Dr. Pauline Clance. So the imposter phenomenon scale was created by Dr. Pauline Clance and one of her colleagues, Dr. Suzanne Imes. So Dr. Clance actually spoke at our very first Women in Medicine Summit. And I'm going to tell you something that she told me that I say every time I talk about this concept. It is not a syndrome, although that is what has been coined by the society that we live in. It is a phenomenon, because by making it a syndrome, you make it seem like there's something wrong with the person. There's a diagnosis. It is not a syndrome. It is a phenomenon. So she told me, Shikha, if you ever speak about it, if you call it a syndrome, I will come find you. So you will find the word syndrome in my talk because that is what people say, but it is not a syndrome. It is a phenomenon. She is a fiery woman. If you ever get the chance to meet her, you should. She's just amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the Clance scale. And basically what it was they created an entire way to assess a score of how much of an imposter do you feel like. And most people, when they're honest, have a very high level of feeling like you're an imposter, especially people who are very high achieving. Again, the purpose of me including things like this is, it's really funny because in Time magazine, they say imposter syndrome isn't a personal flaw, it's a systemic issue. But again, they're calling it a syndrome. So it should say imposter phenomenon isn't a personal flaw. This clicker does not like me very much. Let's see. There we go. All right, so going back. Well, the slide before, if it goes back to it, will show you the scoring of what the scale looked like. Basically, if you have, oh my goodness, what is happening? Here we go. So if you have over a score of 80, when you take this imposter phenomenon scoring, it means that you have very high feelings of being an imposter. And this is something that was published a few years ago, looking at how do you figure out what type of imposter you feel like? Because there's multiple types of imposter phenomenon. So do you worry you're going to be found out? Do you worry that you did something successfully once and when you do it again, you're not going to succeed? If the answer is yes, go down this path. Do you feel your colleagues are more mature than you? Do you set goals that are often unattainable? Are you constantly worried that you're not meeting expectations? Do you think your position in life is mainly because you are lucky? I will tell you one thing Dr. Clance said, when they created this scale, they realized that the majority of people who had the highest level of imposter feelings were women. And I will talk to you a little bit about why that happens and how systems actually contribute to that. Do you feel like praise is just people trying to be nice? Is your success due to outside factors, not because of you? Do you think your work must be flawless all the time? Do you have difficulty delegating tasks? Do you often stay up late at night to work? I am the biggest culprit. Many of you may have received emails from me at like 1 in the morning, and it is not a healthy habit. So if you do it, please stop. Do you feel like you must figure out everything on your own? Are you a micromanager? Many of these are skill sets and traits that physicians have, that type A personalities have, that people who are very high achieving have. And the joke I make is when women apply for a job or a position versus men, and I'm going to say first, this is not an us versus them. I love my male colleagues. They are also fantastic. But it's been shown that if there's 10 criteria that need to be fulfilled for a certain role, most men will say, oh, I only need to fulfill like 4 or 5 of those, and I'm very well qualified. How many criteria do you think women say they need to fulfill before they apply? 12 to 15. So it's really one of those things where you always feel like you have to do more in order to prove yourself. So there's different types of imposter phenomenon. There's the perfectionist, the soloist, the natural genius, the superwoman, and the expert. You can have parts of yourself can be multiple categories within imposter phenomenon. But for example, superwoman, you feel like you have to, or Superman, you have to excel at every role. The expert, you need to know everything and then feel ashamed when you don't. I will say med school feeds that into you because when you're getting asked questions on rounds, it is very common if one student doesn't know, the gunner who does know is always the one who's being praised and the other student is being told you need to study more. So I will tell you as a clinician, as an academic clinician, I intentionally tell my students, if you don't know the answer, that is okay. We all do not know everything. But that has not been the culture in medicine. We were penalized as students, as residents, as fellows for not knowing things. The culture is changing, but that is unfortunately the system in which healthcare was built for years and years and years. The perfectionist, the soloist, these are all very common traits that many of us probably experience. No, did we skip one? Well, if we did, I'm sure it'll flip back at some point. Here we go. So this is the thing that I was saying earlier. Everybody you're walking around with has some feelings of imposter phenomenon, even though they may not admit it. And the other thing, we've always been taught in medicine, we are the experts. We need to show authority. It is not good to say, I don't know, because a patient may sue you, or your attending may criticize you, or God forbid, you're a doctor who doesn't know everything. And then for women, we've been told you need to work twice as hard to get half as much. So not being able to answer every question, feeling that feeling of imposter phenomenon already, it can be very isolating. And so I think it's really important to realize, especially with the rise of social media, we all think that people are succeeding and doing wonderful things. And I mean, I will tell you, most people do not post their failures on social media or their insecurities. They will post, I'm on this fabulous Caribbean cruise, or I just spoke at this amazing conference. But they're not talking about the fact that they were up until 2 in the morning with a vomiting child. Or they're not talking about the fact that, you know, today my 8-year-old told me that I failed miserably by not showing up to some event. Or they're not talking about the fact that somebody spoke rudely to them in the hospital. So things are changing. We're starting to be more and more open and having that real talk where people share their failures. But that was not the culture in healthcare for years and years. So we have to remember a lot of people who look like they have it all together definitely do not have it all together. If you peek behind the curtain, it's very much a Wizard of Oz type situation. All right, slides, keep going for me if you can. All right, so what fuels the flame? Ooh, I don't want to skip this slide because I love this slide. So if you have children or if you don't, everyone should watch this movie. It's called Encanto. It is a fantastic movie. And this woman in this movie, her name is Luisa. And she is the strong one. She is the one who the entire community depends on. She's able to lift houses and move donkeys and really help the community. And there's a song that became kind of the anthem for physicians, I think, during the pandemic, where she was basically struggling and she was like, I'm the strong one, but she was losing her powers and she was failing. So what is it that results in women specifically really struggling when we are supposed to be everything for everyone? We're the CEOs often of our households, and then we're supposed to be leading in our communities, and we're also supposed to be leading in our healthcare systems. So there's harassment, explicit and implicit bias, microaggressions, structural inequities, and then we're trying to balance our personal and professional responsibilities. My husband is also a physician. We went to med school together at Michigan State. And he's sat through my lectures many times, and the first few times he's heard me talk about these things, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. We share the work equally at home, and so we did an experiment. And I said, okay, so you think we share the work equally? I was like, full disclosure, he's a great husband, and he picks up a lot of the slack. I don't cook, he cooks. There's a lot of things he does. But I was like, okay, so for 1 week, I'm gonna start just texting you the things that our daughter sends me during the day. I'm a physician, you're a physician, we're both at work. I'm just gonna send you that. 1 week in, he texted me, he goes, this is emotionally exhausting. And I said, this was 1 week. Our daughter is 11. She's had an Apple Watch for 4 years. Now multiply that 1 week by 4 years. And he was like, how do you do this? And I said, and this is only 1% of what my day is, managing the house while also doing my full-time job and running a nonprofit and being a lovely wife. So I think that there's just a lot of invisible work that we don't talk about, and that fuels this imposter phenomenon, and I will tell you how. So Dr. Clance, myself, and Dr. Kelly Cockett, we published a paper on this cycle of implicit bias, imposter phenomenon, and burnout. And we talk about how these things are all actually connected. So we think that these are very separate things. Doctors are burning out, women are burning out, everybody's leaving medicine. It must be because we're not resilient enough. Have a pizza party and a yoga party and we'll be fine. That is not what fixes the problem. There is this burnout cycle that happens, and it's really built into the healthcare systems in which we live. So let's see if we published this during the pandemic. So it was really interesting to see how it impacted people during the pandemic. So implicit bias is not new. Back in the post-Civil War area, that's when the first generation of female physicians started to advocate that women were actually healthy and not all histrionic and just sickly, okay? Because back then they really thought women were just sickly and frail. It wasn't until the 1970s in the 1970s, the FDA had a policy where women of childbearing age weren't actually allowed to be included in early stage drug trials. They were excluded from observational trials. So many of the medications we prescribe today for hypertension, for cardiovascular disease, were not ever tested on women. So when women come in having a heart attack, they are more often underdiagnosed because they don't have the typical symptoms, because women were not included in many of these studies. It wasn't until 1993 that Congress passed a law saying women had to be included in NIH-funded clinical trials. I think looking around the room, I think all of us were alive in 1993. That was not that long ago. And it boggles my mind. So let's talk about how this gender inequity across career stages also influences policy. So despite policy advancements, there's solutions that we can come up with, like supporting communities, encouraging personal and professional development, and system-wide policy changes. So things that we can really do that are intentional. But the problem is there are systemic barriers to success. Self-advocacy, implicit bias, burnout, and stress all contribute to widening these disparities. So what are the solutions? My dad is a surgeon, and he always tells me, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. So I'm all about not complaining. Let's figure out how to fix this. So we need supportive communities. We need to encourage professional and personal development, but we also need to encourage people to be open about their challenges. My husband used to get mad at me when I gave talks and I would talk about my personal failures or times I struggled. And he would say, why are you doing that? You don't want people to know the struggles you had. And I said, but if people like me don't stand on stage and talk about my struggles, how are my students going to feel comfortable coming to me when they're struggling? They're going to feel like they need to be superhuman. So we need to create that environment where it's okay to say I'm struggling or failing. I tell every mentee I work with, if your dog dies, if God forbid something happens in your family, or if you're just drowning, don't just ghost us, don't just disappear. You need to come to us because we will help you navigate those challenges. And a lot of times the system is not set up to help. And so it fuels that imposter phenomenon of, oh my gosh, I have 6 lectures to get through and I have a test and my grandma's sick in the hospital, but I need to focus on this. There needs to be a way for us to allow personal and professional development to continue without us fueling this, you need to be everything all the time. And there needs to be institutional transparency for grievances. So when people complain, there needs to be a way where actual repercussions happen. So let's talk about women in medicine in general, about some implicit biases and explicit biases that fuel this imposter phenomenon. So during the pandemic, women took on even more invisible work and they were compensated less. Go figure. So this just shows when it comes to the pipeline of women getting promoted, there are more than 50% of people matriculating to medical school who identify as female, but we are not seeing those translated into leadership. We're still seeing less than 20 to 30% of our CEOs, our deans, our healthcare leaders are in those leadership positions, whether it's a chair. I was at a meeting with Dr. Chatterjee here, and we were celebrating the fact that there was a small percentage bump in the number of leaders. And I turned to the person sitting next to me, I said, this is depressing. We are applauding a 2% increase over 10 years. How is that okay when we're seeing an influx of women who are ambitious and smart? Why is this still happening? Women are underrepresented when it comes to recognitions and awards, and it's not because the women are not brilliant, it's because they're not getting nominated. My friends and I realized that, and if you don't know about this, I'm going to tell you a secret. For years, men text each other or call each other before there were cell phones to text and ask to be nominated for things. I had no idea you could do that until a male friend texted me and said, hey, Shikha, can you nominate me for this award? I was like, we can ask people to do that? And so I texted all my friends and I said, hey guys, guess what we can do? We can nominate each other for things. And that's how we ended up getting a lot of our friends nominated for awards and leadership positions. But that's just not something that I was ever taught. We always talk about the golf courses back in like the 50s and 60s or going out for a beer, but that's how people were getting into these positions and we just didn't know. It was like this secret society that we weren't a part of. There's gender-based pay gaps. It's not an opinion, it is a fact. There was a study that came out from Dr. Vinny Arora that showed over a career, women make over $2 million less during their career, $2 million less for doing exactly the same amount of work. I have people who say, you're a doctor, don't complain about your salary. And I say, you're right, we make good money. However, can you imagine if you were doing the same exact thing as the person next to you and they're getting paid $2 million more? I don't care if they're getting paid, $500 or they're getting $5 million. A $2 million discrepancy is a real problem for doing exactly the same amount of work. Women are more likely to be called witchy with a B. It happens, it's very common. When I was in residency, I had a nurse, I was running a code. I had a nurse basically look at me when I said, can I get a pair of sterile gloves? Because I was running the code, I was helping my intern put in a line, and the nurse looked at me, threw the gloves on the ground, and was like, no. In the middle of a code, mind you. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And she said, you did not say please. And I said, can I please get a pair of gloves before this patient dies? And somebody else went and got me gloves and apologized. But my male colleagues, when I told them that, they said, are you kidding? Like they run and get me things. I said, well, I wonder why that is. So, and I'm a very nice person. For those of you who know me, I am not a mean person. So it's not like I had a bad relationship with the nurses. But the problem is women are more likely to be seen as bossy, or aggressive, or angry for just stating a fact. I was on a call once and I hung up and I was in a shared office and the male colleague who was behind me said, Shikha, you sounded really bossy on that call. And I just about had it that day. I was really irritated with life. And I turned to him and I said, well, that's because I'm the boss. And he didn't know what to say. And so I was just so frustrated. I was like, why did you think it was okay to say that to me? He said, well, you came across as bossy. And I said, tell me what the difference is between bossy and a boss. Is it because I'm a woman that I'm bossy? And if you said it, you're a boss? And he was like, I don't know how to answer that. And I said, well, you should think about it before you tell somebody they're bossy. There's also gender-based funding gaps when it comes to research. So the NIH actually published, this is a couple years old now, that women receive $40,000 less in NIH funding than men. I have seen women and men This actually happened. A woman submitted a paper as first author. It got rejected. Same journal, they switched the first author to a man and it got accepted. They didn't make any edits except switching the first author. So when I give these talks and I always have somebody who will say, this is all subjective and anecdotal. I'll say, I give the anecdotes, but then I also show the data. So it's not just anecdotal, this is actually what's happening in real life. All right, the slides work sometimes. So there's something called the Matilda effect that's actually been in the news lately, where it talks about how women will do something and men get credit. We are standing in a health system where that was exactly the case. So I don't need to go into that too much, but that is a very common phenomenon. So we talk about how we talk about men and women. I mentioned the bossy story. This was a study that came out looking at venture capitalists. Women were described as young and inexperienced, while men were young and promising. Men were experienced and knowledgeable. Women were experienced but worried. Men were competent innovators and had money to play with. I love this one. Women were good looking, which is very important, obviously, when you're giving a feedback, and careless with money. So men can play with money, but women are careless with it. Men are cautious, sensible, and level-headed. Women, however, are too cautious and do not dare. So the same words are being used to describe men and women, with a positive connotation for men and a negative connotation for females. And as we go through this, it also is so eye-opening to me as I've been doing this work over the last decade, where so many men are good people and they care, and women do this too, mind you. This is not just men and women do this. There's so many men who don't even realize it's happening. People who have come to my lectures will come up afterwards and say, I did not realize I am doing this. I'm writing gendered reference letters. There's actually, I don't know if I have it in these slides, but there's an online tool you can do and enter your entire recommendation letter to see if you're talking about a man or a woman, if it's gender. So highly recommend it. I do it every time I write a letter. We talk about unconscious bias when people are speaking. So when women are introduced, they're more likely to be introduced by first name. Men are more likely to be introduced by title. Imagine you're at a national conference and you introduce Dr. Johnson, Dr. Smith, Rachel, and Jennifer. Doesn't matter that Rachel and Jennifer are the leading world experts on the topic, and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Smith are just commentators on the topic. Now Dr. Johnson and Dr. Smith are seen as the experts. They are invited to more talks. They are asked all the questions. They are given all the accolades. And who are these other two women sitting here? So we did this study looking at our the largest international oncology conference, and we found that female speakers were less likely to receive a formal address when introduced, 61% versus 81%. And when you talk about women with intersectional identities, so women of color, the numbers are even worse. So it's got picked up by the news over the last several years. Women physicians are less likely to be called doctors. There's been all the stories on the plane where a woman physician comes to help and they don't listen to her, but they'll listen to the man who's actually not a doctor. It's happened to me before, and I have gotten much more confident at saying, I'm literally an MD, please back away. So it's a very common scenario where you see a man and a woman and you don't assume that the woman is a physician. Women in STEM in general, they report that having to provide more evidence that they're competent. Their colleagues have suggested that they should work fewer hours after they have children. I was told in an interview once that I should stay part-time I should work for part-time because they were sure I wanted to have more kids. And I said, but what if I want to work full-time? They were like, no, we know, you're gonna wanna work part-time. I did not take that job. Women in their work environment support one another, and they've often been more likely to be seen as an administrative staff. This, I think, is a really telling study. This came out looking at gender differences in feedback to residents. So basically, what would happen is Emma is progressing well, very thoughtful, reliable, appropriate, confident, has good autonomy. Okay, so that's one evaluation of Emma. I would encourage Emma to be more assertive. During critical resuscitations, she should let those working around her know that she is the team leader, so she needs to be more bossy. Emma argues a lot with the attending. She's very confident in her diagnosis and has a hard time entertaining other possibilities. So let's go through this real quick. Emma's great. Emma is a wallflower and is not being a leader. Emma's a witch with a bee. So what is poor Emma supposed to do? I have been in this situation countless times. My husband, when we were in training, used to say, maybe it's because you just have such a big personality. Maybe it's because you talk so much. And maybe it's because you're so confident. And I was like, how are any of these bad things? Why I don't understand why I'm being penalized. And it wasn't until we actually worked together that he started to see the very different ways he and I were being treated. So this was a tweet from 2022 that I think is so appropriate. University to women, be more assertive. Women, listen and are more assertive. University, there has been a complaint. This is what happens. Let's talk about gender differences in the path to deanship. So this was a study that came out looking at deans from the US and Canada, but they excluded the deans from Canada. They included 132 medical student deans, 96 were men and 36 were women. So let's see how these deans became deans and what led to their ascent into leadership. So the really interesting thing, if my slides will keep moving, is women and men got very different feedback and support. So women, you need to be more proactive to attain deanship. No one coached or mentored them, no one took them under their wing, but men were more likely to be cultivated for deanship. So men would say, I knew I was on the path to being dean. The new dean called me and said, do you want to be director of this? The person said, I know nothing about this. And the dean said, you seem really good at organizing. This might make you dean, so come and do this with me because you may not know now, but I will teach you. There's a lot of mentoring. They were trained to lead. Women had a passion to lead and did professional development courses. Men felt they were born to lead. My favorite, I don't know if it's in one of these slides, but men were like, I was the captain of the football team. Of course I'm a leader. And women were told you need to do professional development courses, despite the fact they were leading teams much larger than the captain of the football team was. Search for difficulties. I used to joke that I was on the women's list of tokenism. At some point, people just started asking these men, want to be dean? So it's a very different path to deanship. So women emphasized they had to work very hard and they were rarely recruited. One man pointed out that he didn't apply to be a board member, they just asked me to apply. Men said I knew I was on the path to becoming a dean, that was just the way I was going. And women were unsure and no one told them they were going to become a dean. They were really, women really had trouble self-promoting because one, when they tried to self-promote, they were told they were bragging. And men were told, attaboy, nice job, you did great. I've had phenomenal mentors who see things in me and see positions that I should be considering that I would not otherwise have considered. That was from a male person in this study. So men were much more likely to be tapped on the shoulder and told to become a dean. And then we already talked about compensation, but one thing that Dr. Gottlieb talks about is the fact that a lot of the work that women do, they spend more time doing things like committees, work groups, things that actually retain people in your institution and actually get organizations awards and save the organization probably billions of dollars, to be perfectly frank, over years. And so Dr. Gottlieb talks about the fact that we need to rethink how we're compensating people for the work that we are voluntold to do. Because I will tell you, I have been voluntold to do a lot of work. And this is a study I mentioned earlier about the $2 million that female physicians earn that are less than men over a 40-year career. So, and this is Dr. Aurora's tweet about it, which was also featured on SNL at one point, which was kind of cool. I will tell you, as the dean of University of Chicago, she did not think she would ever have anything on SNL, but it's now on her CV. So what's holding women back? We started by talking about imposter phenomenon. Well, this is another movie you should watch. Again, I have kids, obviously you can tell, but Inside Out is a great movie, whether you have children or not. So what's holding women back? We talked about Luisa from Encanto, but this is some of the stuff that holds women back. So there's personal and professional satisfaction. We want to be happy in our jobs, and we want to be happy at home. That seems pretty basic. We also, well, there we go. We get all of them at the same time. Sometimes women are embarrassed to negotiate because they've been told not to. I once tried to negotiate for a higher pay at a job I was at, and the person I was talking to, they were asking me to take on a leadership position, and I asked for a little bit of a bump in my salary or some academic administrative time. And the response I got was, well, your husband's a doctor, right? And I said, yes, he is at a different institution. What does that have to do with this conversation? He said, well, you're not the primary breadwinner. Why do you need an increase in pay? And I said, well, my husband is not doing this work. Are you going to pay him for the work I'm doing? And he said, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? I said, well, you're asking me to do more work and still take the same pay. And your justification is because my husband has a job at another hospital taking care of patients. And it really just confused him. I said, thank you for the opportunity. I think I will have to pass. So we are told not to negotiate. It's embarrassing. I mean, that was an embarrassing situation for me to be in. We do a lot of non-promotable work. We've talked about the bias, the harassment, the pay gap, the leadership gap, competing priorities, burnout, family planning, and imposter phenomenon. And I will say we see this a lot in women who are considered mid-career. Despite the fact that I give these talks, my husband and I have sat down and I've had very, very honest conversations with him where I was going on a path and I realized that my personal and my professional responsibilities were not aligned. And I was fighting and fighting and fighting for things that I was not getting for a variety of reasons. And it was taking me away from my kids. And we both decided, he said, what is the point? Because we know that the system, the way it's been going, you're going to keep fighting and you're wasting all this time. So a lot of mid-career women say, forget it. I want off of this hamster wheel. I'm just going to focus on other priorities. And it becomes a real scary thing because we're losing women physicians. And it's happened to many women I know. So accelerating process. So we know that women receive smaller research grants. They often face external demands. If I can get this to move, I'm gonna try to skip over a couple slides so we can get to the important part of how this is systemic. So why should leaders pay attention? Women are outnumber men in med school, and studies show that's good for patients. So women have more innovation, creativity, better retention, more awards. There's study after study after study that has shown outcomes when women physicians are taking care of patients are better. Mortality and morbidity when you have a female surgeon is lower. Readmission rates to the hospital when you have a female physician are lower. So it saves the hospital money. And again, this is not us versus them. Men are also phenomenal physicians. The point I'm trying to make is we are chasing these women out of this career. We are chasing very brilliant, bright physicians who are saving lives out of medicine. And what does that mean for the health of our communities? Bad things. There is a lot of data that shows when leadership is representative of the community in which you serve, outcomes are better. So if 50% of our population is women and we're chasing women out of medicine, how is that going to impact the health of our communities? So I'm not going to talk too much about COVID, but I do want to just show some slides here. And again, you'll have access to these slides. So COVID worsened the gender gap in a lot of ways. Women were publishing less, they were getting paid even less, so the gap that was there got even worse. Women were leaving medicine and leaving healthcare in droves. And like I said, the media was taking notice. The pandemic will take our women 10 years back in the workforce. Women made up nearly all of the job losses last month. This is just a recent article that just came out. So during the pandemic, there was article after article about women leaving medicine, women leaving the job market. It is now January 2026, and we are still seeing women leaving from the workforce, and we're really seeing it a lot in medicine. Think about the deserts we have across the country where we're seeing no OB-GYNs in certain areas. We're seeing it takes a year to get in with the primary care physician. Fields that are women dominated are suffering. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. The world we're living in right now is kind of scary for a variety of reasons to be a doctor in general and to work in the healthcare space. But women are really being targeted. So during COVID, there was less publications by women. Women were less likely to publish. They were less likely to be first female author. And all of this, again, the cumulative impact of all of this has been devastating on women in academics and also women in practice. Come on, mouse. All right, so women are doing more at home. I'm gonna spend 1 minute on this because I love this study. So this showed that women were already responsible for more at home. I talk about my husband a lot. He gets mad when he comes to these talks and I talk about him. So if you look here on this slide, so relationship status, when men and women were, this is right here, when they're single, okay? Their stress level, their emotional exhaustion is about the same. When they're in a committed relationship, a woman's emotional exhaustion goes up and a man's goes down, okay? When they're married, women's emotional exhaustion goes up even more and a man stays about the same. Now let's add kids. They're about the same emotional exhaustion levels when you have children. When you are a woman, your emotional exhaustion level goes up after you have kids. For men, in this study, it actually went down. Remember I told you I gave my husband 1 week of screenshots of texts? This is a perfect example of what happens. And during the pandemic, I mean, it got way worse. I don't know how many of you were doing virtual school at home while also seeing patients or while also doing work. I mean, I did TV interviews for my children were like literally sitting on the ground while I was on TV. So the key points to this really are that research showed, McKinsey showed that women were doing mission critical work. They don't get recognition. Almost 40% had considered downshifting their careers. And more women leaders are disproportionately doing the work that is required to keep companies and hospitals afloat, but they are not being compensated for it, whether it's financially or with leadership opportunities, despite the fact they are critical. Oh my goodness, come on. All right, so let's go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, how imposter phenomenon builds how implicit bias leads to imposter phenomenon and burnout. So I've done a lot of talking about all of the things that are facts, right? About what all are some of the gender gaps that exist in our healthcare systems. So why did I talk about that in a lecture about imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon, and our healthcare systems? Well, if the slide will advance, I will show you. All right, so what's the impact? The lack of opportunities ends up with long-term impacts on academic advancement. Unconscious and explicit bias leads to isolation, marginalization, burnout. And there is a definite link between the advancement of women's health and the advancement of women in academic medicine specifically. So when we talk about why should everybody care, I've had men come up to me and say, why should I care? Tell me if I'm talking to a friend, why should they care about this if they're a man in the workforce? I said, well, one, they should care because it's the right thing to do. But if they don't care about that, they should care about it because it's actually directly impacting health. And it's our system that is doing it. So remember I said at the beginning that high achieving individuals, often women, feel this feeling of, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I applied for this, I didn't get this, I'm doing this talk and I'm not the expert. So we already have this implicit feeling of inadequacy, okay? So that already exists if you're in most people. Then we showed some data that shows there's major disparities in awards, publications, promotions, speaking opportunities, leadership opportunities, grants. So now the system is telling you, you are not as good as your colleague. So I could be working 10 times as hard as somebody else, and I am not given an opportunity. I am obviously the problem. That's what the system is telling us. Then on top of that, there's the biological clock phenomenon. I don't know how many times when I was just married, I had people at work ask me, when are you gonna have kids? How is that gonna impact your career? Did you just go to medical school to get an MRS degree and have babies and leave medicine? You're messing up the entire system. I can't believe you took a spot from somebody else. You're gonna have babies, you're pregnant. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? The system's gonna fall apart. Who's gonna cover your call? I mean, when I got pregnant the first time, it was like I was the first human in the history of medicine to ever get pregnant. My program was so perplexed. And I said, this is not that difficult, folks. Like, we'll just readjust things. But there's a biological clock phenomenon. And then there's also the issue where many women are part of the sandwich generation, where, again, men are doing more and more at home. And I'm talking specifically about heterosexual relationships here. But there's still a lot of issue where women take up the majority of, they're the CEOs of their households. My husband, like I said, does a lot, but I still manage the house when it comes to kids' activities, vaccines, getting doctor's appointments. There's that, and then as aging parents come into the picture, you also often are taking care of aging parents. So all of this feeds into imposter phenomenon. I can't do everything, I can't be everywhere, and I'm failing at everything. So Dr. Templeton actually talks about the fact that women in academia are behind while they're trying to meet research requirements while covering 70% of their home life duties. And as a result, the workday never ends. She says the challenge is if we're asked to lean into our networks as a leader, is there a network for you within your department? Are people inviting you to things? even if you are invited to things, can you go? I mean, I tell my team, I take no meetings before a certain hour because I'm doing kids drop off, and I won't take meetings in the evening because that's family time. So what do we do if those are the only times when people are getting these opportunities? It's really a struggle, because you have to figure out how are you going to manage your life and how are you going to manage your career. And so I love this meme that shows up every now and then on social media when men are like, oh, well, we start at the same time and I'm already up here. We've had the same opportunities. They forget about all of the other stuff that comes in there. And again, some of this is gendered stereotypes, but unfortunately, stereotypes still exist and they feed into our healthcare system. I don't know how many times I've been standing next to a male med student and my patients have referred to them as doctor, and they're like, who are you? I say, this guy is like 20 years younger than me, and you definitely don't want him starting your chemotherapy. So it's a conversation about what's happening in society and how is it impacting our healthcare systems. And honestly, I love being a doctor and I love being in academics, but academics is so far behind when it comes to innovation in these spaces. I will say, we talk about, like, as an oncologist, our innovation, the stuff we're doing in the cancer space is incredible. And then you look at the system and you're like, why? Why are we still doing things that are so antiquated from like the 80s and 90s? Why is this hierarchical structure still in place where the men in charge are the men in charge and the women are often asked to go get the coffee? And it happens. It is changing. There are a lot of male leaders who are advocating and are allies. But the thing is, I say male leaders because the majority of our leaders, as I said earlier, 70% are still men. So women who are fighting for change need men at the top who are also fighting for change. And I will say, we are seeing it, and there is a chance we will start to see it really drive change in the next decade or so, but it's going to take all of us to do the work. This was something a study through Doximity that showed that women were more likely to say they were burned out than men. And this was taken during the pandemic. So let's see if I can keep going here. There we go. So there's a lot of things that drive this burnout. And again, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure that I don't take up too much of your time. But there's a lot of issues that happen that result in these gender differences that continue to lead to burnout and, again, fuel that imposter phenomenon. We have to talk about harassment very briefly. I think we've seen in the national news, especially over the last couple of months, how many people over the years can get away with doing very, 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 very bad things. There's something called pass the trash that I have heard about that happens at a lot of places. I've seen it happen personally where somebody is bad behavior, sexual harassment in general, bullying, and instead of being fired or being reprimanded, they are very politely passed to another institution. There was I've been at multiple institutions, so I will not say which one, but there was an institution where I was told when I was a senior person on the service, I was told in front of a patient by an attending that I had a long distance boyfriend and he must really like me because I was good on my knees. This was said to me in front of an entire team that I was leading. And I said nothing because I didn't know what to say. I just kind of laughed and I said, okay, so Mr. Jones has, type 3 congestive heart failure, and we went on with our day. I later learned that this person had done this to many, many, many people, and he left our institution maybe a year or two later and became a very high up position in another institution across the country. And he had been reported multiple times. And again, this is an anecdote. And my husband didn't even know this had happened to me until 10 years later. And he was furious. And I said, well, what would you have done? I said, who was I going to tell? They weren't going to do anything. And that's what happens. So we need to hold people accountable. We need to hold people accountable, and there needs to be real repercussions. This was a study we published about online harassment, and we found that 1 in 4 physicians had been attacked, 1 in 6 female physicians had been sexually harassed, and those numbers are not okay. Doctors are cyberbullied online, and then they're bullied in the hospital as well. Now, I'm not a negative person. I like to be positive, and like I said, we're running out of time, so I'm going to focus on a few positive things before I close out. Women in medicine are amazing. So despite imposter phenomenon, despite explicit bias, despite harassment, despite all of that negativity, they are doing amazing things. They are advocating for their communities. They are going on TV and talking about really important public health topics. They are testifying in front of Congress. They are setting up vaccine drives for flu shots, for COVID vaccines. They are being featured all over the media for the hard work that they are doing. And the fact that we have women who are so successful doing all these incredible things just goes to show you how resilient we are without the need for yoga and pizza parties. We just need systems that are going to help us be successful. Women are testifying in front of Congress. They're holding rallies on ending gun violence and doing all the things we need to do to be keeping our communities safe and healthy. So why do I talk about all of this? Well, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that imposter phenomenon exists. We need to talk about the fact that it is, and we need to be open about it. I wrote this op-ed actually when I first finished training, and my father had told me not to publish it when I first finished training because he said, you are brilliant, wonderful, you are like 2 minutes out of your training and you just became attending. He said, you do not want the first thing that people to know about you is that you have imposter syndrome. This is before I met Dr. Clance, by the way, that's why it says syndrome. So I said, okay, so I kept it on my desktop and I waited a couple of years. And then he said, okay, you're now established enough. Now might be an okay time to publish this. And that's the reality of it, right? When you are a new attending, you don't want people to feel like you don't know what you're doing. But I think we need to talk about it. We need to talk about being upstanders, not bystanders. So in the moment, we need to stand up for people. We need to make sure that we are addressing microaggressions. And you can follow this action plan where you ask a clarifying question. You come from a place of curiosity, not judgment. Tell the person what you observed and own your feelings. So I tell my 11-year-old daughter, I was telling somebody earlier, she's been going through some bullying. So we went through this plan in a little bit more child-friendly terms. But I told her, if someone's mean to you, just ask them, say, I don't understand, what do you mean? Somebody calls you fat, say, what do you mean? She was like, Mom, everybody knows what that means. And I said, right, but if you ask them, now they have to explain it. You think this kid is going to explain to you why they think you're fat? She was like, oh, that's really smart. And she tried it and it worked. Not every time, but it works. You've got to go through the process and you've got to be an upstander, not a bystander. You've got to figure out how can we stop these situations in the moment. So I'm going to end by saying it's really important for us to remember that our stories are still being written and we actually have the power to drive change and change systems. I hope you understand a little bit more about how the system really has over the years created this environment that fuels imposter phenomenon, which then fuels people leaving and getting burned out. And I hope you've learned some skills in how you can address it in real time in the moment. Because I think in order for us to really change the narrative, we really need to be clear on what we are doing as we move forward. We need to talk about being creative in our sponsorship. We need to lift up others as we rise. We need to really be thinking, how can I get people who are not like me, who don't look like me, who don't sound like me? How do we get people in the room at the table whose voices are often not heard from? Oh, slides, keep going. We need to think about being a mentor and a sponsor. So learning how to not just sponsor someone, but then mentor them to be successful. And mentoring and sponsoring people, again, different from who you've thought of in the past. We need to think about getting men involved. Men need to be leading this along with women. So anytime I get asked to be put on a committee, I always volunteer 2 of my male colleagues with me. One of them was a women in medicine committee, and I was like, Brian and Frank would be great on this. And people laughed, and I said, no, seriously. And they brought them on. So I skipped over a couple of slides that talk a little bit more about how you can use imposter phenomenon to help you. I think the key points here is you need to think critically and identify ways you can improve yourself. I tell my trainees and my kids, think very seriously when somebody gives you feedback, what is their agenda? Are they someone who's mean to you and they're trying to make you feel bad about yourself? Or are they giving you real constructive feedback that can actually help you be better? Because we can always be improving. None of us are perfect. But you've got to think, what are the intentions of the people who are giving you that feedback? And how much do you want to actually incorporate in? What are your goals and how can you achieve them? Think about what you want to be doing and be very strategic about where you spend your time. If you're being voluntold to be on a committee and it's all women, bring some men along. Because the more men I bring to these committees, the more they realize the challenges that we actually are facing and the more they actually want to get involved. Step out of your comfort zone, talk to people who look and sound different than you, and don't let imposter phenomenon stop you. Don't let somebody else's success make you feel any less, and don't let your failures make you think that you don't deserve the opportunities that you're going for, because I can guarantee you do. And so I can't leave without telling you all about our summit. So I hope you're able to join us. Men and women come. It's downtown in September. It's our annual Women in Medicine Summit, and we would love to see you there. One of your fabulous faculty will be speaking there. Dr. Chatterjee is going to be speaking there this coming year. So we would love to have you attend. And I will send her information to send out to all of you because we'd love to have you there. And with that, I'm going to see if I can advance. Okay, so this is my final slide, and this is from Michelle Obama. And I put this very intentionally because I said at the beginning, everyone has some version of imposter phenomenon in them. And I just love this quote. It doesn't go away, that feeling that you shouldn't take me that seriously. What do I know? I share that with you because we all have doubts in our abilities about our power and what power is. Here is the secret. I have been at probably every powerful table that you can think of. They are not that smart. So I want to thank you for your attention. I hope we have a few minutes for questions, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak.
So much, Dr. Jain. Wow, what a lot to think about. We do have a reception in the hour that follows, and so what I'm thinking we could do is maybe take some questions from the Zoom audience if they're still with us, and then those of you who can stay hopefully can meet one of Dr. Jain. So Brian, read them.
Great. We have a question online. The first question is, have you noticed that the English language lent to the imposter phenom, examples, man, woman, men, women, as if a woman, women can't exist without man. My question is, will this change with MPRE people using pronouns, they and them?
Interesting.
And unfortunately, we only have one microphone.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting question. I can say I've actually never been asked that before. So I actually don't know if it will change things. I don't think it will necessarily change things in a good way or a bad way, because we are so entrenched in this man-woman society. There's a lot of people in society who still have not even adopted they, them, or pronouns. And now we're seeing people being attacked for using pronouns. I was on a meeting with some military people, and they said that they actually were getting penalized for having she, her on their pronouns. They all had to remove it from their signatures. So I would say in an ideal world, could it help? Possibly. But we also live in a society where I don't think man, woman, men, woman is ever going to go away. So I think incorporating they, them won't necessarily change it. I think it can add more nuance. But again, if the majority of society does not adopt talking about pronouns or accepting pronouns, I think we are a very long way from seeing that actually having any sort of positive impact, unfortunately.
Are there other questions online? Okay, great. Then we have, for those of you who can stay, I understand if you have somewhere to run at one, but there's just so much to talk about. Any questions from the audience? Well, we have,
I think some of this is that transition between early career and mid-career too, when you start to realize that maybe you're sitting at a table where you always before thought, well, I'm here with everybody who knows better than I do. And so there's comfort in that, right? And it can be really scary when you start to figure out, oh, I might know better, or I might be just as smart as anybody else here. And that fear can be part of what's debilitating. And I get that that's just a part of the imposter phenomenon, but and I see how that fits into the system. But I guess my question is, where does that fit into the system, and how much of that is an individual's responsibility to try and address?
So some of the slides that I had to skip over talked a little bit about that, because there is absolutely, imposter phenomenon comes from us. And so the system is something we cannot change as a whole. So we need to think about how can we actually help ourselves. So I will tell you, I still sit in meetings where I am like, I know more than I know the right thing to do. And I am scared to speak up, or I am uncomfortable to speak up, because one, that it's just implicit to who I am. I've always been somebody who I don't want somebody to think I'm being braggy or bossy or whatever. But also part of it is, it depends on how you react to when you say things, right? Like if you are somebody who says something and people dismiss you, or somebody takes that idea, then you're less likely to say it the next time. So what I tell people when you go into a meeting, I always recommend having one ally with you. It can be a man or a woman, having somebody in the room with you, because one, having somebody sitting next to you can actually give you a bit that you know that you're comfortable with, can give you a bit more confidence. The second thing, if you can't invite somebody with you, figure out who's going to be in the meeting and ask one of them to a pre-meeting. I do this with my boss sometimes. I don't do it as much anymore because he's figured out how to do this now on his own, which is awesome. But I will have a pre-meeting and I will spend 5 minutes and I'll say, hey, I'm going to bring up this. Can you back me up? Or I'm going to bring up this. I have a feeling someone is going to respond in this way. Can you respond instead of me? And we did this a couple of times when I first started in my current job, and it worked so well. He would call me afterwards and he'd say, oh my gosh, how did you know that was going to happen? And I said, because I've been in this situation, and every time I give an idea, someone steals it, or they poo-poo it, and then somebody else suggests it. So what he started doing was he would sit next to me and he would amplify my idea immediately afterwards. Or I would say something and he would say, Shikha, great idea. Let's talk more about how we can make Shikha's idea happen. And it's something the Obama administration, their staffers did, and it worked really well. And that helps fight off that imposter phenomenon, because if you have somebody else there championing you, it can help take off some of that pressure, because you know at least one person is going to back you up. That's one way. The second way is it's really self-reflecting on, is this a good idea? Is this something that I will stand behind? Do I have like the evidence, the data, the whatever to back up what I'm going to suggest? And then training your brain to feel confident before you go in and saying, I know that this is a good idea. Maybe take a propranolol beforehand if you need to, but think about how am I going to present this in a way and be prepared. I'm somebody who talks off the cuff a lot, so I often don't think ahead of how am I going to present it. I've found that when I do, I feel much more confident in presenting it, and I am less likely to feel that imposter phenomenon.
Okay, I think we'll take this as our last question.
It's a $1 million question. So, just outside of the professional world, I was just kind of wondering, like, how much of the imposter phenomenon, but also the whole idea of burnout, especially women in medicine, is actually this, this fact that we take the CEO roles of our households. And I feel like that is, we're trying to manage everything, the career, the professional life, and also being the CEO. So, making sure all of the doctor's appointments are met, and like you were talking about the text messages and kind of, all of this in between type of stuff that just takes so much time and effort. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, what is the role of the society and what is the, role of the universities or our communities to really help with this part, which I think is a big chunk of the problem.
It is $1 million question. I love it. So I think there's a couple of things there. So one, first it starts at home, right? So figuring out if you have a partner, how can you more equitably divide up the responsibilities, and realizing there's a lot of invisible work that your partner may not even know you're doing. My husband really had no idea of the things that were happening and why I was so stressed. So honest to God, one week I have the text message where he was like, this is emotionally exhausting. So talking about the invisible work and figuring out, okay, I can manage this, can you help with that? So that's one thing for the home front. That's really important. As a child, I never realized this concept of it takes a village was so important when you are a working parent. And it is really important. If you can outsource, if you can afford to outsource things, getting help at home, whether it's somebody to clean the house, or whether it's somebody to help with the kids, or whether it's, friends in the community, if you've got young children, carpooling, whatever it is, finding ways to outsource. A lot of women feel guilty and they feel like, oh, this is my job. I'm supposed to be doing this. But in actuality, we should not have guilt for getting somebody to help us at home so that we can be more present when we are home. I think for systems, there's a lot of, I mentioned the part when I was pregnant with my first child, and I did not feel like I was getting support at all. I think that we need to really think about maternity leave, but paternity leave, and also childcare. I know some hospital systems actually have childcare on site for their kids. My friend worked at Google, and when her nanny called out sick, Google sent her a nanny. I don't know if we're ever going to get there in healthcare, but that's the level of, if we want our workers to be able to work, we can't expect women to work like they don't have families and have families like they don't have a job. It's just not sustainable. Men, traditionally, and even now, the most successful men who I've met, I asked them, how do you have enough hours in the day to do all these things? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, when do you get home? How do you have time to do this? He's like, oh, my wife takes care of all those things. And so there were these two residents who was a man and a woman. It was another paper that came out where the woman was struggling in residency because she had children and she had a husband, she had all these things. And the male resident basically said to her, well, you should just, go to this meeting at this time. She said, well, I can't. And I have to pick up my kids. And he was like, oh, I didn't even think of that. She said, you have kids. Where are your children? And he was like, I don't know. He didn't know where his kids were ever, because he was able to focus on his job 100% of the time while he was there and then do all of the extra things. So I used to joke to my husband, I needed a wife. And it's true. And so it really is like many men are very successful because they have that support at home. And many women who could be just as, if not more successful, are not able to get to that level because they don't, for lack of a better phrasing, have a wife at home. So it really, my husband we've been married a while now, and he's seen me grow women in medicine, and it's taken over our lives. And between that, my full-time job, and our 3 kids, we've been able to find a balance, but it's taken time. And he's an only child from Michigan. He's also Indian. He did not grow up in a home where his mom was doing as much as I was. So it was a lot of discussions and conversations, and I have to go out of town. You have to be home. Like, make sure you're not on call this night because you need to be taking care of the kids. But it took a while to get him there, despite the fact he is a very forward-thinking, very, very wonderful man. He did not realize all of those things. So those conversations, they need to start at home, and then systems need to put opportunities in place to help people who have children, because we procreate, we have children, we need to feed them and clothe them and teach them, but we also need to be good at our jobs. So how do we balance that? We need help.
Well, please join me in thanking Dr. Shikha on this summary of so much of the issues that we discuss in WISH, and fortunately some of the solutions. As a reminder, we have our WIMS Journal Club at 4 o'clock today. For those of you who joined that on Zoom, Lucy Hammerberg's presenting a paper on how leadership empowers women in medicine. And I also wanted to mention that there's a seminar next Wednesday, the 11th. I believe it is one of our graduates, Amanda Roskowski, who some of you may know, MD, PhD, will be coming back to speak about a very overlooked medical issue of endometriosis. So that would be interesting. And finally, our final WISH seminar on May 14th with Mabel Abraham. Thank you all so much for joining us, both in person and online, and please stay for the reception if you can.